The Batman. On June 28, 2008, 17-year-old Aijalene Ferguson visited Six Flags over Georgia with his family and church group. The Batman was an inverted roller coaster where passengers' legs dangled freely below the track. During his ride, Ferguson's hat flew off his head. After the ride ended, he wanted to retrieve it. The hat had landed in a restricted area beneath the roller coaster tracks. Warning signs marked the zone as off-limits. Ferguson climbed over two 6-foot fences to reach the area where his hat had fallen. As he searched below, another train approached on the track above him. The train was traveling at 50 miles per hour. A passenger's dangling foot struck Ferguson in the head. The impact was instant. Ferguson was decapitated. Witnesses saw the collision. The train continued to the station while Ferguson's body lay below. Six Flags temporarily closed the Batman ride. It reopened the following day. The park added security around restricted areas and more warning signs. Ferguson's death became one of the most graphic roller coaster fatalities in recent years. The Big Dipper. On May 30, 1972, a warm Tuesday afternoon in London, schools had just broken up for half-term and Battery Fun Fair was packed. The Big Dipper was a wooden roller coaster that had been operating since 1951. 3 cars connected by a steel cable. The cable pulled the cars up a steep incline, then gravity did the rest. Around 2:30 p.m. 31 passengers climbed aboard, mostly children and teenagers. At the front rode a brakeman whose job was to control the brakes. The train began its climb. Then the haulage rope snapped. The train hesitated at the top, then started rolling backwards. The brakeman lunged for the brake lever, but nothing happened. The brake system did not respond. The safety devices that should have stopped a roll back were missing or broken. As the train picked up speed, it hit the curve at the bottom at full speed. The wooden track couldn't handle the force. The first car jumped the rails, smashed through the barrier, and plunged 15 feet. The other 2 cars followed. Passengers were thrown from their seats. When the chaos ended, 5 children were dead, and 13 others were seriously injured. Later, a 15-year-old girl who had survived the crash was standing on a wooden walkway when the platform collapsed beneath her feet. She fell to her death. The subsequent investigation revealed 66 safety violations. The rope was in poor condition. Most safety devices were missing or broken. Investigators also found that employees had been drinking and using drugs while working. The ride's manager and engineer were later acquitted of manslaughter charges. The Big Dipper was torn down and Battery Fun Fair closed by 1974. Britain brought fairgrounds under safety laws following the incident. The Shockwave. On August 23, 1999, 20-year-old Timothy Fan visited King's Dominion with a friend. The Shockwave was a stand-up roller coaster. Passengers stood upright, secured by shoulder harnesses and waist bars. Fan boarded the 6-car train. As the train climbed the lift hill and began its descent, witnesses noticed something wrong. Fan was wiggling and struggling against his restraints. He managed to work one arm free from the shoulder harness. His body began to contort sideways as the train gained speed through the course. Near the end of the ride, the coaster entered a 180 curve. The forces acting on Fan's body proved too powerful. He was violently ejected from the train and thrown 40 feet onto a catwalk beside the tracks. Fan died instantly from head trauma. When the train returned to the station, Fawn's restraints were still locked. He had deliberately worked himself free during the ride. The Shockwave reopened 3 days later. The Mindbender. On June 14, 1986, the West Edmonton Mall in Alberta was packed with visitors. The mall housed an indoor amusement park featuring the Mindbender, a triple-loop steel roller coaster. The Mindbender had 4 cars connected in a train. It reached speeds of 60 miles per hour and took passengers through 3 complete loops. The ride had passed a safety inspection the day before. That evening, Rod Chico and 3 friends climbed into the last car of the train. The train launched and completed the first 2 loops. As it entered the 3rd loop, 4 cap screws in the wheel assembly failed. The last car began to fishtail wildly. The wheel detached from the track. The car derailed completely. The lap bar restraints unlocked, ejecting all 4 passengers 30 feet to the concrete floor below. The train, slowed by the derailment, rolled backwards and crashed into a concrete support pillar. Rescuers found 3 passengers dead. Rod Chico survived but was critically injured. Both his legs were shattered along with his ribs, shoulder, pelvis, and lower back. His body was folded in half from the impact. He spent months learning to walk again. The investigation found design flaws in the wheel assembly and inadequate maintenance. The cap screws had worked loose over time. The Mindbender was closed for months while engineers redesigned the system. When it reopened, anti-rollback devices were installed, seat belts were added, and the train was reduced from 4 cars to 3. The accident became Canada's worst roller coaster disaster. The Big Dipper 2. On July 24, 1930, a hot summer day in Omaha, Nebraska, Krug Park was packed with visitors. The Big Dipper was a wooden roller coaster. 4 cars connected in a train. The ride pulled passengers up the first hill, then gravity did the rest. That afternoon, 23 passengers filled the 4 cars. Among them were Gladys Lundgren, C.H. Stout, Anthony Politica, and 15-year-old Ruth Frell. The train began its climb up the first hill. Then a bolt in the brake mechanism worked loose and jammed one of the wheels. The first car jumped the track. It broke through the guardrail and plunged 35 feet to the ground. The other 3 cars were dragged off behind it. Passengers were thrown from their seats or crushed beneath the derailed cars. The impact was devastating. 4 people were dead and 19 others were seriously injured, but the crowd of spectators had surged forward to see what happened. Thousands of people surrounded the crash site, blocking emergency access. Ambulances arrived, but couldn't reach the victims. Police were forced to break down sections of the park fence to create routes for medical personnel. The investigation found that the loose bolt had caused the wheel to lock up, forcing the car off the rails. Krug Park never recovered. Attendance dropped and the park closed by 1940. The city of Omaha banned roller coasters for years afterwards. The site was later converted into a public park with no rides. The Big Dipper accident became known as the deadliest roller coaster disaster in U.S. history at that time. The Matterhorn bobsleds on January 3, 1984. 48-year-old Dolly Young visited Disneyland with 5 friends. The Matterhorn bobsleds featured small sleds that traveled through an artificial mountain at 43 miles per hour. Young sat alone in her sled while her friends took the parallel track. The sleds began their descent through the mountains, tunnels. Partway through the ride, Young fell from her bobsled onto the tracks. An oncoming sled approached on the parallel track. The family inside thought the figure on the tracks was a dummy. The bobsled struck Young at full speed. She was decapitated instantly. The father in the oncoming sled realized what had happened. He screamed at his daughters to close their eyes as their sled passed over Young's body. The ride operators shut down the attraction when Young's empty sled arrived at the station. Young was pronounced dead at the scene. Her safety restraint was found fastened on a neighboring seat. The Matterhorn reopened the next day. Disney made modifications to the ride, though the changes were not disclosed. The Wild Wonder. On August 28, 1999, Kimberly Bailey and her 8-year-old daughter Jessica visited Jillian's Wonderland Pier in Ocean City, New Jersey. The Wild Wonder was a small steel roller coaster. Individual cars were pulled up a 40-foot incline before rolling through the course. Bailey and Jessica climbed into one of the cars. As their car neared the top of the lift hill, the anti-rollback mechanism failed. The car lost contact with the lift chain and began rolling backwards down the incline. The car gained speed as it hurtled toward the station. It crashed violently into the loading area at the bottom. Bailey and Jessica were thrown from the car. Both died instantly. The park had replaced the coaster's anti-rollback device with an unapproved locally-made part. The faulty component had failed to engage. The Wild Wonder was shut down and removed. New Jersey upgraded its regulations to require manufacturer-approved parts only. The Derby Racer. In 1911, the Derby Racer opened at River Beach, Massachusetts. It featured 2 parallel tracks where trains raced against each other in a figure-8 pattern. The ride had no restraints, no speed controls, and basic wooden construction. Passengers simply held on as the trains raced around curves and hills. Within weeks of opening, disaster struck. A man was thrown from his car during a turn and died. Later that year, the company's own treasurer was killed. He had stood up in his car to lecture passengers about safety when he was ejected from the ride. Authorities closed the coaster and demanded safety improvements. The owners installed primitive brakes and lap bars before reopening, but the deaths continued. On a busy day in 1917, a man lost his hat during the ride. He tried to retrieve it and fell out of his car on a high incline. He landed on the adjacent track. The other racing train struck him at full speed. The wreckage told the story. The impact broke nearly every bone in his body. He died shortly after. Another passenger was thrown from the train in 1929. Despite 3 confirmed deaths and numerous injuries, the Derby Racer continued operating for 25 years. Each incident led to minor modifications, but the fundamental design remained dangerous. The ride's license was revoked and reinstated. The Derby Racer finally closed in 1936 when it was replaced by a newer model. It became known as one of the most dangerous roller coasters ever built. The Rough Riders. In 1910, the Rough Riders roller coaster opened at Coney Island. The ride featured an electric-powered system where the motorman controlled speed with a throttle. That first year, the train derailed on a sharp curve. 17 passengers were thrown from the track. 3 people were dead and many others were seriously injured. Coney Island officials made minor improvements, but the ride continued operating. 5 years later, on July 27, 1915, 6 passengers boarded the Rough Riders. As the train gained speed down a steep incline, it approached a sharp turn. The motorman took the turn too fast. The train's wheels left the track. The car flipped on its side 30 feet in the air. Passengers were hurled into an iron railing and fell to the ground below. The damage was severe. 3 riders were killed by the fall. 2 others clung to the wrecked car until police rescued them. A woman and her son survived by hanging onto the handrail. A bystander on the ground was struck by a falling body. The Rough Riders had now killed 6 people in 5 years. The ride was shut down after the 1915 accident and dismantled within a few years. The repeated tragedies helped establish early safety regulations at Coney Island, including requirements for better braking systems and restraints. The Fujian Ryan 2, on May 5, 2007, Expoland Amusement Park in Osaka was packed with visitors for Children's Day. Fujian Ryan 2 was a stand-up roller coaster. 20 passengers boarded the 6-car train, including 19-year-old university student Yoshino Kogawara. The train launched and began its course. As it traveled 131 feet above the ground, passengers heard a loud crack. The second car suddenly derailed. The wheel axle had snapped, causing the car to tilt violently. Kawara was thrown against the guardrail at high speed. She struck her head and was killed instantly. The derailed car dragged the rest of the train for 984 feet before stopping. 19 other passengers were injured. The investigation revealed extreme negligence. The park had skipped annual maintenance in 2007. The wheel axle had not been replaced in 15 years. Park officials had reported the axle as good condition based only on visual inspection. The axle had cracked from metal fatigue. Proper testing would have detected the crack, but Expoland had bypassed all safety requirements. Expoland attendance collapsed after the accident. The park briefly reopened but closed permanently in 2009 as the owners declared bankruptcy. The Son of Beast. In 2000, Kings Island opened Son of Beast, a wooden roller coaster that reached speeds of 78 miles per hour. The ride had problems from the start, with track malfunctions and rough jolting. In 2001, riders suffered broken vertebrae and a broken neck. Another passenger was hospitalized with back injuries in 2003. On July 9, 2006, 27 passengers were aboard when one train cracked a support beam while passing through the Rose Bowl section. The damaged beam caused the track to sag. When the next train hit the weakened section, the track dipped suddenly. The jolt was brutal. 27 people were rushed to hospitals with chest and neck injuries. One passenger said it felt like hitting a brick wall. The investigation found cracked and splintered wooden support beams throughout the structure. Son of Beasts reopened after modifications, but another accident occurred in 2009. A passenger suffered a broken blood vessel in her head. The ride never operated again. It was demolished in 2012. Son of Beast had become one of the most notorious failures in roller coaster history. The Cobra. In 2008, the Cobra roller coaster opened at Tivoli Frieden Amusement Park in Aarhus, Denmark. Months after opening, the front car detached from the track. 4 young riders were injured with fractures and concussions. The park made repairs and the Cobra continued operating. On July 14, 2022, riders felt a jolt and heard cracking metal as the train went through its course. The rear car broke off from the track. The last row of seats detached and hung off the side of the coaster. A 14-year-old girl in the rear car was thrown and killed. A 13-year-old boy next to her suffered a hand injury, but survived. The train ground to a halt. Park staff evacuated the area. The girl could not be saved. The same structural flaw had now caused 2 major accidents. Tivoli Frieden dismantled the Cobra the next day, and the ride was permanently closed. The Cobra had failed twice in identical fashion over 14 years of operation. The Quimera. On September 28, 2019, visitors gathered at La Feria Chapultepec Mexico in Mexico City. Quimera was a triple-loop steel roller coaster. The aging Schwarzkopf model had a history of maintenance issues. That day, witnesses saw the last car of a train shake violently and derail on a turn near the end of the ride. The rear car flipped upside down and detached completely. 2 riders were thrown out from 33 feet. 2 young men, ages 18 and 21, died from head injuries. 2 women were also injured when the car slammed into the structure. The investigation found that a component in the car's axle assembly had broken, causing it to detach. Mexico City authorities immediately closed La Feria. Investigators found multiple safety violations and revoked the park's permit. Within months, the historic amusement park was permanently shut down and dismantled. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.